During this week building up to Good Friday, we're taking 5 each day to consider the 7 words Jesus spoke from the cross and the meaning of those words for us today, especially in our suffering world. On the night that Jesus was betrayed, he was in a garden called the Garden of Gethsemane. 4 years ago, I had the opportunity to stand in that garden in Israel, and there are still olive trees there that are around 2,000 years old that would have been there when Jesus was there. The amazing thing about Gethsemane is that it was the location of an olive press, and that word Gethsemane means the place of crushing. And so as we think about the significance of Jesus' death, how extraordinary that the night before he died, he was in an olive press for crushing, a place of crushing. It reminds me of Isaiah, where the prophet says that he was pierced for our transgressions and crushed for our iniquities. And so today, as we consider the words spoken from the cross by Jesus, when he says, my God, why have you forsaken me?" We're dwelling for a moment on what it really meant for Jesus to be crushed. Now, to understand this phrase, my God, why have you forsaken me?" we would need to know that Jesus, as a Jewish man, was quoting from a psalm. And when someone quoted from a psalm, the first line of a psalm, they meant the whole psalm, because everybody knew what the rest of the psalm was. They'd all memorized it. So in Jewish culture, as Jesus is dying and saying, my God, why have you forsaken me?" he's invoking all of Psalm 22, not just that first phrase. Now, you see, sometimes people have worried about this. My God, why have you forsaken me?" They've envisaged that maybe there's some kind of break in the Trinity. There's some kind of logical breakdown or fundamental contradiction that happens as the Father forsakes the Son, and there's now no more Trinity. But actually, that would only be the case if death were to be understood as atheists understand death, ceasing to exist, as if one person of the Trinity in dying was ceasing to exist. But that is not how Christians understand death. Death in the Bible is a state of existence. It's a spiritual, ongoing existence beyond physical life, but our life beyond the grave. And so as Jesus dies and he takes the penalty of sin upon himself, spiritual death, he experiences that forsakenness, but still in that relationship of the Trinity. So as Jesus invokes that first line of Psalm 22, he is experiencing the crushing that Isaiah prophesied. He is experiencing genuine forsakenness, but not a fundamental logical contradiction. And as he invokes Psalm 22, this is what he's saying. The rest of the psalm speaks, written 1,000 years earlier, speaks of, in verse 6, he was despised and rejected. Jesus goes through that, being despised and rejected, as the mockers and sneerers go past. In verse 14 of Psalm 22, it speaks of him being poured out like water and bones being out of joint. That is exactly what happened physically during crucifixion. Verse 15 of Psalm 22 speaks of being unbearably thirsty. The thirst of the crucified man was a well-known thing. Verse 16 of Psalm 22 speaks of the one suffering, having Gentile dogs surrounding, being encircled and surrounded. And then Psalm 22 speaks of hands and feet being pierced. Now, Psalm 22 was written before crucifixion was invented. This is an extraordinary prophetic promise of what was going to come. And Jesus knew that. As he cries out from the cross, he's drawing his Jewish hearers' attention to the fact that his very death by crucifixion, that forsakenness by God, but also the piercing, being encircled by dogs, also garments being divided up and shared around as they were by the Roman soldiers in the crucifixion account. Jesus, it's as if he's shouting out, can you see that what I am doing for you was prophesied long ago? My God, why have you forsaken me?" is a cry of dereliction, but it is not ultimately hopeless. Psalm 22 speaks of how God has not despised the suffering of the afflicted one. And verse 27 speaks of how all the nations of the earth will come to worship the Lord through this suffering. As Jesus points us to this psalm by quoting the first line, he also points us to the end. So there is hope. The cry of dereliction is ultimately also a cry of hope for us.